You've felt it, haven't you? That moment when reality flickers, when synchronicities pile up so thick you can't call them coincidence anymore. When you know something before it happens, when you think of someone and they call, when you visualize something and it manifests so perfectly it feels orchestrated. And then the doubt creeps in. Am I losing my mind? Am I seeing patterns that aren't there? Am I just desperate? Let me tell you something. I used to think I was going crazy too, because here's what they told you, right? They said manifestation is wishful thinking, that consciousness can't affect reality, that the quantum field is just physics jargon for things that have nothing to do with your life. They said, keep that woo-woo stuff to yourself. They said, there's no scientific basis. They said, you're confusing correlation with causation. And every time you tried to explain what you experienced, that feeling of creating your reality, that sense of the universe responding to you, people looked at you like you'd lost touch with the real world. So you stopped talking about it, you kept it private. You second-guessed your own experiences. But here's the thing nobody tells you. The reason they don't talk about it isn't because it's not real. It's because they're terrified of what it means if it is. But what if I told you that a 7th century Buddhist monk proved the holographic nature of reality before Isaac Newton was even born, that he demonstrated it so elegantly, so undeniably that it influenced the father of calculus himself? That the mathematics we use to create holograms today, the technology that science accepts without question, came directly from this ancient spiritual insight? What if I told you that your ancestors knew this truth 1,000 years before Western science dared to whisper it in academic journals? Here's where it gets interesting. In the year 672 in China, a Zen master named Fa-Tsang was summoned by Empress Wu. She wanted to understand the relationship between the one and the many, how individual things could be separate yet interconnected at the same time. Fa-Tsang took her to a room he'd prepared with mirrors covering every surface, walls, ceiling, floor. In the center, he placed a single candle and a crystal. When he lit that candle, something stunning happened. Ready to go deeper? The light didn't just reflect, it multiplied infinitely. Each mirror reflected the candle, but it also reflected every other mirror reflecting the candle. The crystal scattered the light into every direction, and each fragment of light was reflected again and again and again, creating an infinite network of light where every point contained the reflection of every other point. Fa-Tsang turned to the Empress and said, "Every single point of light you see contains the whole. Change one, and you change them all. This is the nature of reality itself." This wasn't metaphor. This was a demonstration of what Buddhist philosophy called the jewel net of Indra, a universe where every single point contains a reflection of the totality. Now here's where most people miss the connection. 300 years ago, a German mathematician named Gottfried Leibniz became obsessed with this exact Buddhist teaching. He studied the Huayan philosophy, the same tradition Fa-Tsang belonged to, and from this he developed his concept of monads. Leibniz proposed that the universe is made of fundamental units, monads, and each monad contains within itself a reflection of the entire universe. Not just connected to it, contains it. Does that sound familiar? It should, because Leibniz didn't just philosophize. He invented integral calculus to mathematically describe these relationships, the mathematics of wholes and parts, the mathematics of infinite series and their convergence. And centuries later, in 1947, a physicist named Dennis Gabor used Leibniz's calculus, this same mathematical framework born from Buddhist philosophy, to invent the hologram. Let that sink in for a moment. Buddhist wisdom, German mathematician, integral calculus, holographic technology. The technology that science now uses every day has its roots in spiritual insight that Western academia dismissed as mysticism. But here's the kicker. When physicists like David Bohm and neuroscientists like Karl Pribram started proposing that the universe itself might be holographic, that your brain might process reality holographically, They were rediscovering what Fa-Tsang demonstrated in that mirror room over 1,000 years ago. You don't need permission from Western science to trust what your ancestors already knew. You don't need a peer-reviewed paper to validate experiences that entire lineages of practitioners have mapped in exquisite detail. The question isn't whether the holographic model is real. The question is, why did it take Western science so long to catch up? And more importantly, what else are they still catching up to? Shall we move into the proof you can experience yourself? Let me ask you this. What if I told you that your ears aren't just receiving sound, they're emitting it? Most people think hearing is passive. Sound waves hit your eardrum, your brain processes them, done. Observer and observed, nice and separate, except it's not. In the 1970s, an Italian researcher named Hugo Zuccarelli was studying Carl Pribram's holographic brain model. Pribram had proposed that your brain doesn't store memories in specific locations like files in a cabinet. Instead, it stores them holographically. Every part contains the whole, just like Fa-Tsang's mirrors. Zuccarelli thought, if the brain is holographic, how does it process sound? And he discovered something wild. Your ears, specifically the outer hair cells in your cochlea, actively emit sound. They don't just receive. They generate acoustic emissions that interact with incoming sound waves to create interference patterns. Sound familiar? That's exactly how a hologram works. Two waves interfering to create a three-dimensional image. He called it holophonic sound. And when he created recordings using this principle, something impossible happened. People wearing headphones could pinpoint the exact three-dimensional location of sounds, even with just one ear. Think about that. Normal stereo sound gives you left-right, but holophonic sound gives you front-back, up-down, distance. Full spatial awareness from a flat recording. People reported smelling matches being lit in the recording, physically lifting their feet when they heard footsteps approaching, ducking when they heard a whisper moving around their head. Their brains weren't just processing the sound. They were participating in creating the spatial experience. This isn't theory. This is testable, reproducible. You can experience it right now if you find a holophonic recording, but here's what no one talks about. If your auditory system is holographic, if you are actively participating in creating the sound you hear rather than passively receiving it, what does that say about the rest of your reality? What if your visual system works the same way? Your sense of touch, your perception of time? What if you've never been a passive observer of reality at all? What if you've been co-creating it this entire time, and the only difference between people who manifest consciously and those who don't is whether they realize they're doing it? The holophonic proof isn't just about sound. It's about participation. It's about the dissolution of the line between observer and observed. You're not experiencing a reality that exists independent of you. You're experiencing a reality that cannot exist without your participation. And that changes everything. But wait, it gets stranger. Because if reality requires participation, what happens when that participation becomes conscious? When you stop being a passive experiencer and become an active creator? Let's talk about what happens when order emerges from chaos. Most people think of entropy like this. Things fall apart. Order decays into chaos. Your room gets messier. Your body ages. The universe winds down. That's the second law of thermodynamics, and it's true. Closed systems move toward disorder. But here's what they don't teach you in high school physics. Some systems aren't closed. And in open systems, systems exchanging energy with their environment, something radical happens. Order spontaneously emerges from chaos. A Russian-Belgian chemist named Ilya Prigogine won the Nobel Prize for discovering this. He called them dissipative structures. Picture this. You have a pot of water. At low heat, the molecules bounce around randomly. Chaos. But as you increase the heat, as you push the system far from equilibrium, suddenly the chaos organizes itself. The water forms convection cells, hexagonal patterns, coherent structures that didn't exist before. The chaos didn't gradually become order. It jumped. It popped into existence. Prigogine realized this is how complexity evolves, how life emerged from chemistry, how consciousness arose from biology. Not through slow, gradual accumulation, but through sudden phase transitions where new levels of organization spontaneously appear. And here's where it connects to you, to your life, to your manifestations. When your life feels chaotic, when everything seems to be falling apart, when you're far from equilibrium, when the old patterns aren't working anymore, you're not failing. You're approaching a phase transition. Your system is preparing to reorganize at a higher level of complexity. But here's the part that'll blow your mind. Where does that new order come from? Prigogine proposed that these structures don't emerge from the visible level of reality. They unfold from what physicist David Bohm called the implicate order, a deeper, hidden dimension where the blueprint for organization already exists. Think about it. The hexagonal pattern in that pot of water. It's not random. It's not trial and error. It's a coherent structure that emerges because it already exists as a possibility in the deeper fabric of physics. And if consciousness operates the same way, if your desires, your visualizations, your intentions exist in the implicate order, waiting to unfold into the explicit reality you can see and touch, then manifestation isn't about forcing reality to conform to your will. It's not about muscling your way through. It's about creating the conditions, the far from equilibrium state, the openness, the coherence, that allow what already exists in potential to spontaneously actualize. You're not building your future from scratch. You're midwifing it from the implicate order where it already waits. The chaos you're experiencing? It's not the end. It's the necessary disruption before a higher order emerges. But if this is true, if consciousness can collapse potential into reality, why doesn't everyone do it successfully? Let me show you what science discovered about the role of the observer. Here's a question nobody wants to answer. Why do some laboratories succeed with psi experiments while others fail, using the exact same protocols, same equipment, same methodology, same statistical analysis, different results? For decades, skeptics pointed to this as proof that psychic phenomena don't exist. If it were real, they said, it would be reproducible. Except there's another explanation, one that makes scientists deeply uncomfortable. What if the experimenter's consciousness is part of the experiment? Stay with me here. Physicist Helmut Schmidt did something radical in the 1970s. He built random number generators, machines that produce truly random output based on quantum processes. No patterns, no predictability. Then he had people try to influence the output with their intention alone. And it worked. Statistically significant results. People could make random machines less random just by focusing their attention. But here's the strange part. When Schmidt took the data tapes and showed them to different people, some believers, some skeptics, the data itself seemed to shift depending on who observed it first. It's as if reality remained in a superposition of possibilities until someone with a strong expectation collapsed it into the outcome they expected. Other researchers found similar patterns. Valerie Hunt, who studied electromagnetic fields around the body, refused to let anyone who'd been drinking alcohol into her laboratory. Not because of safety, because their consciousness interfered with the measurements. In Russia, psychologists working on remote viewing experiments discovered that having even one person in the room who expected failure contaminated the results. So they started hypnotizing all participants into a light trance before experiments, to quiet the internal skeptic. Dr. William Broad found that experimenters with positive attitudes towards psi got positive results. Skeptical experimenters got null results. Same protocols, different consciousness. Let me tell you what this means. In a holographic universe, there is no objectivity. You cannot separate the observer from the observed. You cannot extract yourself from the experiment called your life. Your expectation is part of the system. Your belief is a variable. Your consciousness is a force. The scientists who insist on pure objectivity, who demand that reality exist independent of observation, they're not being rigorous. They're being naive about the nature of reality itself. Because in the quantum realm, observation doesn't just measure reality, it participates in creating it. And if that's true at the subatomic level, where particles exist in superposition until observed, Why wouldn't it be true at the scale of your daily life? When you hold an intention, when you visualize an outcome, when you collapse into certainty rather than doubt, you're not engaging in magical thinking. You're wielding the same force that collapses quantum wave functions in physics labs. The question is, are you doing it consciously or unconsciously? But there's something else, something they don't want you to know. Want to know the crazy part? They already know. In the late 1990s, a psychiatrist conducted an anonymous survey. He sent it to 228 psychiatrists across the United States. Not New Age practitioners, not spiritual teachers, board-certified psychiatrists. The question, do you believe that understanding psychic phenomena will be important for future psychiatrists? 58% said yes. 44% said they believed psychic factors play a role in the healing process. Read that again. More than half of the psychiatric community privately acknowledges that consciousness can do things that materialism says it can't. But here's the thing, they won't say it publicly. Dr. Brian Weiss knows this firsthand. He's the former chairman of psychiatry at Mount Sinai Medical Center, Yale Medical School graduate. By every conventional measure, a pillar of mainstream medicine. He started doing past life regression therapy accidentally. A patient in a normal hypnosis session spontaneously began recalling what appeared to be previous lives. And the phobias that had resisted years of conventional treatment vanished. He was skeptical, but he couldn't argue with results, so he kept working with it, quietly, for years. Published research, helped hundreds of patients, and when he finally went public with a book, you know what happened? His phone started ringing off the hook. Emails flooded in, but not from critics, from colleagues. Hundreds of doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, all saying the same thing. I've been doing this work for 10 to 20 years. I've seen it work, but I can't talk about it publicly. They'll destroy my career. Let that sink in. The medical establishment has practitioners who've been using techniques that involve consciousness beyond the brain. Evidence of past lives. Telepathic connections between therapist and patient for decades, successfully. But they keep it secret because the stigma is so severe that even mentioning it risks professional suicide. This isn't about lack of evidence. This is about fear, social control, the protection of a worldview that keeps people feeling powerless and separate. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. If consciousness is fundamental, if you really can influence reality with focused intention, if you really are connected to everything in a holographic web, then the structures of authority that depend on your ignorance of that power start to crumble. They need you to believe you're separate, that you're small, that reality is something that happens to you, not something you participate in creating. And the moment you wake up to your actual nature, game over. So they don't suppress the evidence. They just stay silent. They keep doing the work behind closed doors while publicly maintaining the materialist facade. But you know what? Their silence doesn't make it less true. It just makes them complicit. Now, you have the proof, you have the evidence, you understand the mechanism. The question is, what do you do with it? So you have all this knowledge now, the history, the science, the proof that consciousness participates in reality, and I can already hear the question forming. Okay, so now what? What do I actually do with this? Because here's where most people get stuck. They turn this into another thing to study, another book to read, another podcast to consume, another course to take. They become experts in the theory of consciousness without ever actually shifting their own. Let me tell you where this goes wrong. Western academia trains us to be observers. Objective, detached. We study phenomena from the outside, but in a holographic universe, there is no outside. The shift that needs to happen, the radical reorientation, is from observer to experiencer, from theorist to experimentalist, from believer to practitioner. Let me give you an example. In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Michael Harner went to the Amazon to study shamanic practices. He was doing standard anthropological work, observe the natives, take notes, maintain scientific distance. Until one day, the shamans told him, You're never going to understand this from the outside. You have to experience it yourself. So he participated in their traditional ceremony, and his entire worldview shattered. He saw, not believed, saw non-physical entities. He experienced dimensions of reality that materialist science says don't exist. And when he came back and compared his experiences with the shamanic cosmology he'd been studying, they matched perfectly. He didn't abandon rigorous methodology, he expanded it. He became what we might call a psychonaut, an explorer of consciousness using the same careful observation and documentation that astronomers use to map space. And that's the future of science. Not skeptics sitting in ivory towers dismissing experiences they refuse to have, but researchers willing to become the experiment. The Monroe Institute has been doing this for decades. They've trained hundreds, maybe thousands of people to have out-of-body experiences, reproducibly, verifiably, with increasingly sophisticated protocols. They don't just read about consciousness beyond the body, they teach you how to experience it. Lucid dreaming researchers don't just interview people who have lucid dreams. They train themselves to become lucid, then document the characteristics of that state from the inside. This is the methodology we need. First-person rigorous exploration of consciousness. And here's what I want you to understand. You don't need to go to the Amazon. You don't need to pay thousands of dollars for a retreat. You don't need to wait for permission from an institution. You can start right now, in your own life, with your own consciousness. The research question is simple. Can I influence my reality through focused intention and coherent emotion? The methodology is straightforward. Create a clear intention, visualize it daily, track the results, note the synchronicities, document what happens, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to discover what's true for you through direct experience. Because here's the thing about this work. You can read 1,000 books about the holographic universe, but until you actually experience reality shifting in response to your consciousness, until you watch an unlikely synchronicity manifest, until you feel the collapse from possibility into actuality, it remains theoretical. And theories don't transform you. Experience does. So my question for you is this. Are you ready to stop being a student of consciousness and become an explorer? Are you ready to stop reading about the implicate order and start collapsing it into your lived reality because the version of you that you're trying to become, it already exists? Let me show you where. Think about those dissipative structures we talked about earlier, those hexagonal patterns that pop into existence when water is heated. They don't build themselves atom by atom. They don't gradually emerge through trial and error. They jump into existence as a complete coherent structure because the blueprint already exists in the mathematics of thermodynamics, in the implicate order of physical law. Now apply that to you, the you that you visualize in your manifestation practice, the you that's financially abundant, the you that's in a loving relationship, the you that's healthy, confident, creatively expressed. Most people think they have to build that person, brick by brick, habit by habit, slow, grinding effort over years. And then they wonder why it feels so exhausting, why they keep falling back to old patterns, why there's so much resistance. But what if you're not building? What if you're allowing? What if that version of you already exists as a complete, coherent possibility in the implicate order, and your job isn't to construct it, but to create the conditions for it to unfold? Prigogine showed us that new structures emerge when a system is pushed far from equilibrium, when the old patterns become unstable. That chaos you've been experiencing, that breakdown of your old life, it's not failure, it's destabilization. It's the necessary disequilibrium before a phase transition. And the practices you do, the visualization, the meditation, the intentional emotion, those aren't building blocks. They're the heat, the energy input that pushes your system toward the threshold where the new structure can spontaneously emerge. You're not trying to become someone new. You're aligning with a version of yourself that already exists in potential. And here's the elegant part. In a holographic model, that future self isn't separate from you. It's already encoded in you. Every cell contains the whole. Every moment contains all possibilities. You don't have to reach for it. You have to tune to it. like adjusting a radio dial until the station comes in clear. Not striving, allowing, not forcing, coherence. Because in the language of the quantum field, effort is noise, desperation is static, need pushes away. But coherent intention, clear visualization backed by genuine emotion without attachment to timing, that's signal. That's what the field responds to. You're not small and powerless trying to manifest against an indifferent universe. You're the universe experiencing itself through this particular node of consciousness, remembering a pattern that already exists in your deeper nature. The separation you feel between who you are and who you're becoming, that's the illusion. That's the only thing standing in the way. The implicate order is already complete. Your highest self already exists. The future you want is already real in the realm of possibility. Your work is simply to stop interfering with its emergence. Shall we talk about what that actually looks like? Here's the thing they never tell you in science class. The thing that philosophers have known for millennia, but Western materialism buried under layers of objectivity and measurement. The separation between you and the universe is an illusion. The biggest illusion you've ever believed. You think you're a separate thing, a consciousness trapped in a body, looking out at a world that exists independent of you. Subject and object, observer and observed, you versus everything else. But in a holographic universe, that boundary doesn't exist. Remember Fa-Tsang's room of mirrors? Every point of light contained the whole. Every reflection was both itself and the totality. You're not a wave trying to survive in the ocean. You are the ocean, temporarily experiencing itself as a wave. And when you really get that, not intellectually but viscerally, everything changes. Because if you are the universe experiencing itself, then your desires aren't separate from the universe's unfolding. They're not you trying to extract something from an unwilling reality. They're the universe attempting to express itself through you. Your longing for abundance, that's abundance trying to manifest through this particular aperture of consciousness. Your desire for love, that's the universe's drive toward connection, choosing you as its instrument. Your creative impulses, that's the implicate order pressing to become explicate through your unique configuration of awareness. You're not fighting against reality, you're dancing with it, co-creating, participating in the eternal process of potential becoming actual. And the moment you stop seeing yourself as separate, the moment you recognize your actual nature as the field itself, temporarily localized, the whole game changes. You stop trying to make things happen. You start allowing them to happen through you. You stop muscling your way through manifestation. You start surfing the wave of unfolding, not passive, not powerless, but aligned. And alignment is where the real magic happens. So let me ask you, are you ready to stop being a visitor in this universe and remember you're its author? Here's what I want you to do. Not to prove anything to me, not to convince anyone else, but to discover your own power through direct experience. For the next 30 days, stop being a believer. Become a researcher. Choose one thing you want to manifest, not something vague, something specific, something you can verify. Maybe it's a specific amount of money, maybe it's a particular opportunity, maybe it's a conversation with someone specific. Make it concrete enough that you'll know when it happens. Now treat this like a scientific experiment. You're the hypothesis tester. Your consciousness is the variable. Reality is the laboratory. Every morning spend 10 minutes in visualization. Not hoping, not wishing, actually experiencing the reality of already having it. Feel the emotions as if it's already done. Here's the critical part. After those 10 minutes, release it completely. Don't check for results obsessively. Don't white-knuckle grip the steering wheel of manifestation. You've input the signal into the field. Trust that the field received it. Then go about your day with coherent expectation but no desperate need. Track what happens. Keep a journal. Note the synchronicities. Write down the unexpected opportunities. Document the seemingly random conversations that turn out to be relevant. Approach this with the same rigor a scientist brings to data collection. No confirmation bias, no explaining away what doesn't fit, just honest observation of what happens when you deliberately collapse a specific potential from the implicate order. Do this for 30 days, not years, not a lifetime commitment, just 1 month of focused experimentation. And at the end, you'll have data, not someone else's theory, not another guru's promise, your own lived experience. You'll either discover that consciousness does influence reality or you won't. But either way, you'll know from direct experience rather than second-hand belief. You'll have stopped being a student of manifestation and become a practitioner, an explorer, a psychonaut of your own potential. That's how the future of science unfolds. One consciousness at a time, willing to become the experiment. If something in this conversation resonated, if you felt that spark of recognition, that sense of remembering something you'd temporarily forgotten, then you know what to do. Drop one word in the comments, just one. The word that captures the energy you're feeling right now, the frequency you're tuning to, because here's what I've discovered. The people who engage aren't passive consumers, they're co-creators, and this community is itself a dissipative structure emerging from the implicate order. Your participation matters, your consciousness contributes. Now, this is episode 27 of Beyond Reality, 27 episodes building to what comes next. And in the final episode, we're going somewhere I've been hesitant to take you. We're talking about what happens when humanity remembers it was never supposed to be here permanently. When the dream time becomes accessible again. When we stop being observers and become what we were always meant to be. The playlist link is in the description below, along with the next episode. But I'll tell you this, what's coming will either terrify you or liberate you. Possibly both. I'll see you at the end of reality.